My guiding principle as mayor is that my obligation to you, the people of Seattle, to do our best to spend every dollar we have toward the needs of the city and its people in a responsible and efficient and effective way.
That's Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell outlining his $8.3 billion budget proposal to the City Council this week, a budget that includes reducing a $250 million deficit while paying for about $100 million in new priorities and laying off about 160 people. We're going to take a look at that, especially at the programs where the mayor does want to make some big investments, like police hiring and new surveillance equipment. And we'll also look at why King County's head of public defense has stepped down abruptly and what that means for an already overworked public defense system. All of this and more this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on the Seattle channel, and the views expressed here are mine. My co-host David Croman is on leave, so I'm with a very special guest here, Erica C. Barnett, founder of Publicola. And Erica, I know you're slogging through the 735-page budget proposal from the city, just like I am, but I gotta say, that double rainbow photo right on page one was just a really nice touch, don't you think?
Everything's coming up rainbows.
Yeah, I get that. There's no pot of gold. Spoiler alert there with this budget, but I did like that touch there very much. Thank you very much, Erica, for joining me. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast on the first floor of City Hall, and a special thanks to our show patrons. You keep things running here, folks. And if you want access to patrons first content, get your questions answered on the show and more, please become a patron. Support the show on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of this podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get rolling here. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Erica, I wanted to get your take on the way Bruce Harrell wants to balance the budget. So as I'm seeing it, he's taking $287 million from the payroll tax on big businesses, known as Jumpstart, to plug this major hole in the budget and also pay for top priorities, including some investments in police hiring and public safety. So Jumpstart funds were intended for affordable housing, Green New Deal programs, but a good chunk of that money, as Mayor Harrell envisions it, will go into the general fund. And I think Harrell's stance is that, hey, more money's coming into Jumpstart than we thought, so we can still kind of fund affordable housing, but we can use a large chunk of it on this budget cap. What's your take on what's happening here?
Well, it's a majority of it. In fact, the mayor taking $287 million leaves, $200 million and change for those original priorities. And, I think it is contrary to the spirit of the original tax, which, the big businesses obviously opposed, the Seattle Metro Chamber opposed. And now, they and Harrell are celebrating the fact that this money is pouring in and sort of turning it into an all-purpose money spigot to pay for, basically any purpose whatsoever. And I think it's short-sighted in the sense that if we had, had this money, and of course the budget hasn't passed yet, but right. if it passes, basically as written, this money that would have gone to affordable housing will go to other purposes. Housing is one of the biggest problems in Seattle right now and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. And so in not investing in housing now, the city is sort of exacerbating the problem tomorrow. It's not like building housing is going to get any easier in 5-10 years or cheaper. And so, it just feels very short-sighted to me and contrary to the spirit of the tax.
Yeah. And do you see any meaningful pushback from the council on this other than, obviously, you've got Councilmember Morales, who's been pushing back for a lot of these different priorities when it comes to affordable housing. Is there anybody else on the council that you can see making some meaningful changes to what the mayor's presented here?
Well, I don't want to predict the behavior of 8 people, but
that's fair. Yeah.
But right after the mayor put out his budget, a bunch of them put out statements supporting it. And, and they have mostly all pledged to pass no new taxes and to do things within our means, quote unquote. And, and I think this using Jumpstart as a slush fund is their way of doing things within their means. So I don't anticipate that the basic philosophy behind this move is going to change because of any council action. Tammy Morales, of course, will oppose it.
Right. I'm looking forward to seeing how that discussion goes and what tweaks, if any, do come to this. I will say that mayors put out these budgets. The council will have some tweaks to this. That always happens with these, but how substantial they'll be is the big question. And I did want to talk about, in terms of cuts, full disclosure here, folks, My work as an independent contractor at Seattle Channel is not funded in the mayor's proposal. 6 people are slated to be laid off from the channel as well. Harrell's plan is to reduce the channel to basic coverage of council meetings and announcements from the mayor's office. I'll keep you posted on what happens there. Deep breath. But more generally, Erica, we're talking about 159 job cuts total. The city says half of those roles are vacant currently. Most of the actual layoffs would happen within information technology. That's where the Seattle channel is. Human resources, permitting, finance, and administrative service. Do you see any impact from this reduction in jobs? What do you think?
Well, I mean, of course, beyond Seattle Channel, which I have to say, you and your show and the producers there, are the reason that I tune into Seattle Channel.
Thank you.
But even beyond that, I mean, I think that the mayor said these are internal facing jobs, essentially implying in yesterday's speech that they don't really matter and won't affect anything. I think that is a way of saying I'm not going to cut anything that you're going to immediately see. But cutting IT, that has impacts. Cutting, finance and administrative services is this huge department that covers, tremendous swaths of the city. Cutting all this internal stuff and also cutting from, people who review permits for development, it's going to have an impact on the city's ability to get things done internally. And it is also going to have an impact on some public-facing services. So I don't think it's, I think the mayor is being a little misleading to suggest that, these jobs don't matter. I mean, he didn't put it that way, but, he said you won't see any difference in the public-facing services. I mean, just one, example that jumped out at me is Discovery Park staffing for their environmental center and visitor center and also services at Carkeep Park are losing 7 staffers, actually 7 FTEs, 9 staffers, and that is supposedly going to be replaced by some kind of future public-private partnership. No idea what that means. Wow. But I mean, that is a public facing service. So, people will see the impact of these reductions. And I think it will be apparent once these 160 positions are cut, what impact they'll have on the public.
Yeah. Well, I did want to talk about where the city does want to spend money, and that's on police hiring for sure. Erica, as you know, the council's working on a plan to increase bonuses paid to Lateral Seattle Police Department hires. So officers who transfer to SPD from other departments around the region, around the country, this from $30,000 to $50,000. The council wants to make this program permanent. And you wrote about this in Publicola with 2 major issues. I wanted to break down the first one with you here. Does raising bonuses work in terms of increasing police hiring? I think I know I'm going to hear here, but I wanted to hear you say it.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen consistently that it does not. Bonuses in general do not, increase, they sometimes do increase hiring, but they don't increase retention. And, one thing that they're taking away from this bonus program was a 5-year requirement. If you got a bonus, you had to stay for 5 years or you'd have to pay it back. Now it's, if you stay for 1 year, you get to keep your 1 year bonus, 2 years, 2-year bonus, and so on.
They prorate it, right? Okay.
Yeah. So the incentive to even stay is gone. And so, I mean, what actually does increase hiring generally, and we're seeing this at SPD now, is increasing pay. And they are getting more applicants now.
I've definitely heard that from council members, right?
Yeah, they have 6-figure starting salaries now, and that does get people in the door.
I did want to talk about the cost of this bonus program, though, too. About $1.5 million. This is money that would come from the SPD's budget. And I know this is a big bone of contention, too. And I wanted to break this down with you because many council members have said, see, the money's there in the SPD's budget. This program is already paid for. I know you have a different take on this. Can we break this part down, please?
Yeah, I mean, the city is funding, Harrell's budget funds this year 1,900 or so police positions and a bunch of, other stuff related to the police department. Not all of those positions are filled. A lot of them are, these people call them ghost cop positions. And the city could take the money away and the authority away from SPD for those positions and use it, say, to fill the budget gap, but they don't. And so there's essentially this slush fund that exists in the police department every single year that allows the council or the mayor to use it for whatever their priorities happen to be. Now, they are also increasing the police budget this year, or proposing to, but those bonuses are going to come out of that slush fund.
What do you see happening next year? Because this is always a point that the council talks about every year. I remember talking about it just about every year over the past several here. Do you see an appetite for that discussion here when it comes to these unfilled positions and trying to save other programs or what have you? Any possibilities there? What do you think?
Well, Sarah Nelson, the council president, and other council members kept emphasizing to the public the other day that when they were approving this, that, this you all don't understand. You think this is new money, but it's not new money. It's just it's in the police department. So I think there is, I would say a little bit of condescension to the public, which has brought this up year after year after year after year, in saying, don't worry, you just don't understand. This is already funded. So no, I don't think there's going to be much of that discussion this year. I think the public will bring it up, but I don't think it's going to carry much weight with the council.
Well, we'll see what happens next with that one. That's a very important part of what's happening here with this budget, that police funding. And I know we're going to be talking about that over the next several weeks here as the council gets into its budget process, which is essentially now through the end of November. So thank you very much for that, Erica. Up next, a new push for 24/7 video surveillance from the city of Seattle. It's coming to a neighborhood near you. Who's watching and why? We're going to explain coming up on Now Hear This. Well, this week, the council's Public Safety Committee approved a plan to add 2 new surveillance technology platforms to Seattle: live closed-circuit TV cameras that will monitor at least 5 Seattle neighborhoods, and a new real-time crime center that will allow police to monitor multiple sources of live information, possibly even from private cameras like Ring systems. As you might imagine, groups like ACLU have raised privacy concerns about this and have come out against this proposal. But Council President Sarah Nelson says this plan is necessary from a public safety perspective.
I respect the concern of organizations such as the ACLU that is focused on civil liberties. And we as council have to balance that concern with other concerns and the safety, overall general public safety and health and well-being of our constituents.
Erica, you wrote about this in Publicola this week and brought up the fact that the city has a surveillance ordinance that requires a review by a surveillance working group, and that group recommended against these cameras, but those findings weren't even presented to the council. What happened here?
Well, I mean, there are 6 members of the working group. 5, recommended against doing this. And the council, I mean, it seems just did not have any interest in hearing what they had to say in a public forum. And in fact, the head of that working group was reduced to speaking in public comment, lining up to have 2 minutes to speak in public comment to basically summarize those findings, when, ordinarily I would have expected to see like a meeting, a panel sitting down with the council and discussing why they recommended so strongly against these surveillance cameras, which will be in multiple neighborhoods all over the city. And actually the budget includes $425,000 to expand them to neighborhoods beyond the ones that were approved.
That sounds big, and I just wanted to talk about, I guess, the argument that the city is making here, the city council is making. Seattle has fewer cops. The city can use technology like this to deploy officers more efficiently, and a lot of neighborhoods have spoken up about this and have been supportive about this. Plenty of neighbors in West Seattle are saying, hey, let's get these cameras down on Alki and try to cut down on street racing. I guess I'm looking at that argument of these cameras are an important and useful tool for law enforcement. How do you look at that piece of it?
Initially, they're supposed to be used for very serious crimes like violent crimes, gun violence, things like that. That's what's in the legislation. Rob Saka added, who represents West Seattle, added an amendment that they will consider less serious crimes, which I guess is how they're going to get street racing and things like that. I think that neighbors often, unfortunately, respond to false promises because the city council, says that if we, have live 24/7 surveillance of entire neighborhoods at all times, that will somehow alleviate crimes that are happening on the ground and on the streets. I mean, the fact is that we've had 40 years of analysis of these CCTV cameras all over the world. A giant meta study said that they have no impact on violent crime and a small impact on property crime. In parking lots where they can be used to solve car thefts. So that is basically where they work. And it is not what the city is doing. The city is just planning to surveil entire neighborhoods, with these, always on cameras. And I think it's going to be a false promise.
You're concerned about it from the privacy perspective, or maybe the ACLU is concerned about it. Tell me about these cameras from that privacy perspective, and why are there concerns about this?
Yeah, I'll just bring up one example that came up in several reports opposing this idea, which is the fact that these cameras are going to be largely in neighborhoods that have large minority populations. Up on Aurora, the cameras will go from 145th Street all the way down to 85th.
It's really close to where the soap zone is.
It's almost exactly.
Yeah. Prevent prostitution. Right. Keep going.
Yeah. And so there's large Latino population. There's going to be surveillance on Westlake Plaza, where there are often demonstrations by protesters. And so what it does is it creates a situation where if you go out in public in your own neighborhood, or in the case of Westlake, if you engage in, if you exercise your First Amendment right to demonstrate, you are under surveillance. And the response from the police department to that first concern was basically, it's not an issue because people will know the cameras are there and they can choose not to go within view of the cameras. Well, these are in people's neighborhoods. And again, in neighborhoods where, you're talking about lower income people, downtown, a lot of unsheltered people who don't have the choice not to be in public. And so it's a false choice to say you just can't go outside. But that is basically what the police are saying.
Well, it's all public safety all the time on the podcast this week. I did want to move along to another issue with you, if I could, talking about some news that came out at the end of last week where the city of Seattle signed a new deal with King County to open up jail space for misdemeanor offenders, 135 beds total. So, Erica, you wrote about this in Publicola too. It's about 60 more beds than what the city has been using right now, because back in July, the county lifted booking restrictions for misdemeanors downtowns. Now it's open to citywide, apparently. Help me out with what happens now, and help me out also with what's been happening at the jail, because I know they've had some issues there with staffing. But is it going to be a deal where the city attorney just kind of cranks up the convictions and the beds start filling up, or what do you see happening here?
Well, I think what we're going to see is, a lot more people being sort of brought in after they're arrested and booked, and then they'll be in for a couple of days and get out pre-trial. I mean, that's generally what the jail is used for when the city puts misdemeanor, people who are accused of misdemeanors there. So it's going to contribute to the, however you want to look at it, overcrowding or understaffing at the jail. Right.
Which has been an issue for some time now. It's important to point that out.
Yeah, it's been an issue basically since the COVID pandemic began. Yeah. But now we're getting rid of the booking restrictions without meaningfully or adequately increasing the number of guards. Now, I know that they have been able to hire more corrections officers, but I don't know if it's enough. I noted in my budget post today that on Wednesday that the county budget includes $1.725 million for suicide prevention measures at the county's jails. I'm not sure that cramming more people into that jail is going to improve that situation.
I guess I wanted to switch gears a little with you. Can you connect the dots for me between what the city's doing here to use jail beds in King County and this whole idea of using that SCORE jail facility down in Des Moines? Is that going to be off the table now? Or let's talk about that piece, please.
Yeah, it's not off the table, which surprised me a little bit because I thought, maybe this was a bargaining chip to do, what is a more rational thing, which is put people, if we're going to jail people for crimes in Seattle, jail them in Seattle rather than shipping them back and forth to Des Moines. But in fact, that's in the budget too. So the budget includes, millions more dollars. I think it's $3 million something for SCORE and a couple million for the beds at the downtown jail. So they're doing both, at least for now.
Just from the city's perspective, is this a situation now where we will see more of this, more arrests on the streets and things like that? Does this give the city more leeway to do that? Do you have a feel for what it's going to look like, I guess, to have these new jail beds available and what that looks like from a public safety perspective?
Well, I think that, with all the new laws that have passed, both the drug misdemeanor law last year, and then, these soda and soap zones and prostitution, loitering,
et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to be arresting more people. The budget also includes $10 million for emphasis patrols for cops to make overtime in areas that the city decides, need to be policed more heavily. And those generally are these same areas that are the soap zones, that are the soda zones, and that are, these surveillance camera zones. So, I mean, you don't fund police, to go in and arrest people without arresting people. So I anticipate we will see more arrests. We'll see more people in jail. From a public safety perspective, I mean, I'm on the record saying I don't think any of this kind of cycle of, throwing people in jail and letting them out and throwing people in jail and letting them out, it works. And, there's really no services in the new budget to actually address the sort of quote unquote carrot part of that equation. It's all stick.
Yeah, this is another good discussion for the council and the budget times ahead, and I appreciate you breaking all these different pieces down with me, Erica. Thank you very much. I did want to move on to another topic with you here. This is a story that Erica broke in Publicola about the director of King County's Department of Public Defense stepping down rather abruptly last week. What does that mean for the future of that department and an overload of cases for public defenders as well? We're going to break it down on What's Next. Last week, Anita Kandawal, the director of King County's Department of Public Defense since 2018, sent out an email saying she was resigning and her last day would be October 4th. Erica, you broke this story in Publicola. What's going on? Why is she leaving?
That is a matter of much speculation.
Okay.
The news, I think, was a surprise to people on Kandawal's staff and DPD. There's a couple hundred people who work there. And I don't think most of them saw this coming. And so she declined interviews, at least with me. I saw the Seattle Times followed up a week after I broke the story, and they also didn't have anything, specific about why she's leaving. I think that the story that I heard through back channels is she was exhausted, and it's a really hard job to do, but especially during COVID. She's been leading DPD for 6 years. But I do think, you mentioned caseloads. The state Supreme Court in 3 weeks, I believe, is going to rule on whether to reduce the caseloads standards for attorneys, for public defense attorneys. That discussion about whether to reduce caseloads for attorneys could go either way. If it goes the way that King County Executive Dal Constantine, for example, wants it to go, and caseloads are not reduced, I think that would, be a burden or a continued burden on DPD attorneys and staff who are stressed out with the caseloads that they have to manage now. I won't go into all the numbers because it gets a little bit confusing, but basically the Supreme Court would reduce those caseloads so people can spend more time defending clients than they do now. It's also a time when the county, we didn't really talk about their budget, but they are also cutting their budget. And so the Department of Public Defense always fighting for its budget at the county level. So, that could be a factor. But yeah, we really don't know. I mean, it does kind of throw the Department of Public Defense into a little bit of chaos. And right now they have an interim director who is taking over, but no deputy director. And so there's been a lot of shuffling around, and we'll see how the leadership settles out. But Kandawal has been there for 6 years. She's really shaped the culture of DPD, has often been very combative against some of the decisions that the Seattle City Council has made.
Right, with these bookings into jail, et cetera. Sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about, she's really vocally opposed it. And been a voice for the other side on that. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll learn more in the coming days and weeks. But definitely it's going to be a big culture shift.
Let me jump in there and just ask about. I wanted to go back to this piece that you mentioned about King County and caseloads and the budget that they're working on right now. As I understand it, the idea was to hire a number more new attorneys to help with this public defender crunch so that they don't have these crazy caseloads. And I saw it in your report there. We're talking about public defenders taking on hundreds of cases. And just so you know, folks, this isn't a situation where, like a prosecutor, you can say, nope, I don't want that one. I don't want that one. These are all cases that have to have a public defender on them because that's our legal system. And so I was just trying to get the impact on on what's happening with the legal system in a greater way here, especially when you consider that King County is at a very important moment here with potentially hiring more attorneys to try to deal with this.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to consider some of the other stuff we've been talking about. All of these new cases that are going to be coming in for new crimes that the city is creating, including these soap and soda areas where if you violate an order to be outside of an area, you can get a gross misdemeanor. When those cases come through and when the city attorney chooses to prosecute them, just as you said, I mean, the defense attorneys don't have any choice but to defend them. So when you have hundreds of cases, it's very hard to provide an adequate defense to each individual person. And so, yeah, I mean, they're arguing and have argued for a long time that they need to reduce these caseloads, and that means money.
And I think the executive, Dow Constantine, was trying to push it maybe up to the state level, too, and saying, hey, we're really overwhelmed here in terms of these different cases. We need some more help from the state here. Can you take it to that next level here? Because I think that's a piece of this, too. The county is struggling with this. They're trying to figure out where the dollars come from. And I feel like Executive Constantine is really trying to reach out to the state to advocate for that.
Well, sure. I mean, I think that local officials often sort of push the issues that they are facing off to the state. We're also seeing that at the Seattle City Council.
Right.
And, with Bob Kettle saying it's the state's responsibility to take care of public health. But, ultimately, it is very difficult and probably not a good idea to rely on a legislature that meets, for a short period every year to come together and fix things for King County. I mean, in some ways, we are on our own here, and it is a matter of priorities within a budget. Are we going to fund more police officers? The county's budget funds more sheriff's deputies, which is the equivalent of police officers.
Yep.
And so, ultimately, it comes down to within our existing budget, what are we going to prioritize? And so I think that buck passing to the state, while I agree the state could do more and, could look at its own priorities, is ultimately a little bit off point when you're looking at, local budgets that are on the table now.
Great points all, Erica. I need to wrap up with you, though, and I did want to talk about your reporting on another very important local crisis. What to do with all the cherry tomatoes that are still on the vine at my house and all around the region here. I thought you had a really cool way of looking at this. What's the answer to this, Erica? Tell us, please.
Well, I have an update too.
Oh, really? What's going on? Okay.
Well, so I posted over the weekend. I do a little post when I can about stuff that has nothing to do with local politics.
Important to do that.
I'm just
yes.
enjoying. And because I like doing that kind of writing, and I've been writing about my tomato crisis this year, which is that I have too many tomatoes, which is not a thing that usually happens in Seattle. So
right.
I posted a couple of great tomato sauce recipes that are really easy.
You're using cherry tomatoes to make tomato sauce. That's not customary, I would say.
Well, you blend them. This is the great thing.
Okay.
So you just throw them in your Vitamix or whatever you happen to have. I think you should have a Vitamix.
Yes. Right.
And blend them, and then I just freeze them. Now I have a giant freezer because I'm kind of a crazy person, and I like to put all of my produce up for my Pea-Patch every year.
She's crazy, not just because of the freezer, but yes, keep going.
Yeah, and so I just throw 4 containers of that in my freezer, and I have them all winter, and it's great. The update is I also have a lot of green cherry tomatoes that I don't think are going to ripen.
Yeah, what do you do there? I definitely have some of those. Okay,
so I pickled those, and you just make a very, simple pickle brine with salt and sugar. You can look it up online, pickling green tomatoes, pickling whatever. Throw some garlic in, throw a hot dried pepper in, and you can can those if you want. I am not sure how I'm going to use them yet.
Yeah.
I just sort of panic pickled a bunch of stuff this weekend. But
panic pickling, that's a whole other story to itself. I got you. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but I do think that if you are like, let's say, a martini lover, they would be great to use like olives. And so that's one idea. I don't drink, but I was looking at them and I was like, wow, these look a lot like olives. Huh. Throw them on a Bloody Mary, and those are my ideas so far, which both involve an activity I don't participate in, but I'm going to figure out how to use them. I've got time because they're canned and they don't go to waste.
That is great. Erica C. Barnett, the C stands for culinary expert. Thank you so much once again for joining me. This is great to have you. Erica, I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, thank you, Erica. Thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews. the podcast where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to the patrons who support the show. If you are not a patron, love to have you. Find the podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. You can hear us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2024.